You wake up before the sun does, not because someone told you to, because the house is already moving. The sound of grain against stone, the smell of the oven beginning to heat, the particular quality of silence that exists only in the minutes before a village day begins. You are 7 years old, maybe 8. No one is entirely sure. You know your name. You know the shape of the field your father works. You know which goat tends to stray and which section of the canal runs dry first in Shemu. You know these things the way you know how to breathe, not because you learned them, but because you have never lived in a world where they were not true. Outside, the Nile is still dark. The air is cool in a way it will not be by the time the morning is over. You pick up the clay jar. You go to the river. This is how the day begins. This is how it has always begun. This is what it was to be a child in ancient Egypt. Not the child of a scribe or a priest or a merchant with boats on the Nile. A child born into a family that worked the land and the river and had very little beyond what each season gave. An ordinary child, a child whose hands were part of how the family survived. Most children in ancient Egypt were born into the same basic condition. A mud brick house near a field, a family whose survival depended on the river, a set of tasks that began as soon as the child's body was large enough to be useful. There was no childhood in the modern sense, no protected period of years set aside from the responsibilities of adult life, but there was play, there was laughter, there were toys found in the graves of children who did not survive, put there by parents who understood that something should travel with them into whatever came next. A wooden horse with moving legs, a clay crocodile with a mouth that opened, a cloth doll, a painted ball. These objects tell us something important, that the people who made them did not see childhood as something to rush through. They saw it as something real, worth marking, worth honoring, even in grief. But outside the hours of play, and those hours were limited, a child in a poor Egyptian household was a working member of the family. From around the age of 4 or 5, small tasks appeared: carrying water, scaring birds from the grain, tending animals, helping with the grinding, not as punishment, not as cruelty, as necessity, the kind so ordinary and so old that no one thought to question it because it had always been this way, and the alternative was not having enough. The jar is heavy when it is full. You have carried it since before you could remember, first in your arms, then on your head when your neck was strong enough to hold the weight. The path to the river is familiar, in the way that only a path walked every day of your life can be familiar. You know the loose stone near the palm tree. You know the place where the bank is soft and the jar goes in cleanly. You know how to angle your body against the weight of the full jar so that the water doesn't slosh. Around you, others are doing the same. An older girl from the next house, 2 boys from the far end of the lane, younger than you, carrying a smaller jar between them. An old woman with a cracked vessel she has repaired so many times, the repairs are older than you are. Nobody speaks much. Morning is for work, not words. Back at the house, your mother is already at the quern, the flat grinding stone worn to a shallow curve by her mother's hands before hers. The sound of grain against stone is the sound of every morning. It will be the sound of every morning for the rest of your life. You set the jar down. You eat quickly, a piece of last night's bread, an onion, a cup of thick beer that everyone drinks because the water is not always safe on its own. Then you go back outside. The day has tasks waiting, and the tasks do not wait long. The birds come with the light. Hundreds of them. Ibises, herons, sparrows, doves, descending on the grain fields with a confidence that comes from knowing that someone will chase them and someone will fail. That someone is you. You stand at the edge of the field with a sling and a handful of smooth river stones, and you make noise, shouts, whistles, the sharp crack of the sling sending a stone into the flock. They rise, circle, settle 50 meters away. You walk toward them. They rise again. This goes on for hours. It is not complicated work, but it requires presence. You cannot leave, cannot be distracted, cannot let the field go unguarded for the time it takes the birds to clean a section of grain that represents your family's food for weeks. You understand this without being told. In the afternoon, when the heat peaks and even the birds have retreated, you tend the animals. A small flock, 2 goats and 4 sheep that live at the edge of the family's compound. They need to eat, to be moved, to be kept from the grain. You know each one. You have names for them that your parents do not use. One goat follows you without being led. You do not mention this to anyone. It is simply a thing you know. No one decided what you would learn. It was decided before you were born, by where you were born, by who your father was, by what the family needed. The daughters learned what their mothers knew, how to grind without letting the stone cut the flour with grit, how to shape bread so it bakes evenly, how to read the quality of linen by its weight and its hand, how to carry a full jar on your head for half a kilometer without spilling. These were not small skills. They were the foundation of everything the household ran on. The sons followed their fathers into the field or into a trade, carpentry, pottery, sandal making, if the family had a connection to a craftsman who would take an apprentice. Most did not. Most sons became what their fathers were, and most fathers were farmers. There was another possibility, rare but real. A boy noticed by a scribe, a boy whose memory was sharp, whose hand was steady, who could be taught to read and write the hundreds of hieroglyphs that gave access to the entire machinery of Egyptian administration. To become a scribe was to leave the field behind entirely, to enter a different world, with rations, with shelter, with the kind of security that came from being someone the state needed. The path was narrow. Most boys who stood at its entrance did not walk through, but it existed, and every parent in every mud brick house, near every field, in every village along the Nile, knew it existed. Childhood in ancient Egypt left marks that the body carried into adulthood. Archaeological examination of skeletal remains from non-elite Egyptian burials shows evidence that is specific and that speaks without interpretation. Spinal compression in young adults, consistent with years of load-bearing that began before the spine had finished developing. Dental wear patterns from grit in the bread, ground in on stone querns that shed microscopic particles into every loaf. Healed fractures, the kind sustained in falls, in the accidents of agricultural work, in the ordinary physical risks of a childhood spent in fields and on riverbanks and on rooftops. This is not a record of suffering for its own sake. It is a record of use, of bodies that were asked to work early and did. And alongside that record, the other one, the toys in the graves, the amulets placed around the necks of children buried with the same ritual care given to adults, the eye of Horus, the small figure of Bess, the tiny scarab, the love letters that the archaeological record cannot produce directly, but that the objects insist were real. The sun goes down fast in Egypt. One moment it is afternoon, hot, white, absolute, and then the light shifts, turns orange, turns gold, and within an hour the stars are out, and the air is cool again. The day's tasks are finished, or they are not finished, and they will be there tomorrow. The family gathers. The meal is the largest of the day. More bread, lentils perhaps, fish if the river was generous, dates from the tree at the compound edge. You eat with your hands. Everyone does. After the meal, the lamp, a small clay dish of oil with a linen wick, and the circle of warm light it makes on the walls and the faces inside it. This is the hour when stories might be told, when a grandparent's voice fills the space between the walls, when the world outside, the field, the birds, the tax official, the weight of the water jar, is temporarily held back by the smallness of the light and the closeness of the people inside it. You do not know, sitting in that circle, that 3,000 years from now, someone will try to reconstruct this moment. You only know that the lamp is warm, that the bread was enough today, that the goat is sleeping at the edge of the compound, that tomorrow the jar will need filling again. You close your eyes before the lamp burns out. You are a child in ancient Egypt on an ordinary night, and the world is exactly the size of the light that lamp makes. Their names were not recorded, not one. Not the girl who carried the water jar every morning for 10 years before she was old enough to pass that task to a younger sibling. Not the boy who stood in the grain field for hours every day during harvest season, whose arm got stronger year by year from swinging the sling. Not the child who had a name for the goat that followed without being led and told no one. They were not recorded because the people who recorded things were not recording them. They were recording the pharaoh, the military campaigns, the boundaries of fields and the assessment of grain and the movement of goods along the river. But the children were there, in the teeth of the bread, in the compression of the spine, in the worn path between the house and the river, in the toys placed in graves by hands that could not let a small life go unmarked. They carried the jar, they chased the birds, they fell asleep before the lamp burned out. They were simply living in the only world they knew, which was large enough and real enough and theirs. If this quiet journey into the past resonates with you, you're welcome to subscribe and be part of this project. It's the best way to support these reconstructions and keep them alive here on YouTube.